Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 16. In this lecture, we want to learn how to route redistribute in EIGRP. Therefore, after this lecture, I expect you to be able to describe and configure EIGRP route redistribution. Let's start our today's mission. What is route redistribution? The main question here is that when do we need route redistribution? Assume that this is your corporate network, and for example, you use EIGRP for your internal routing. And this is another company which uses OSPF as its routing protocol. Now, your company and the other company merges together. This is a normal situation in business. Two companies joined, or a company acquire another one. Either way, they join together. And now you have a routing domain here and another routing domain here with different languages. If you want to change both sides into one routing protocol, for example, choose OSPF as your routing protocol for the new network or EIGRP, you may have downtime, and it is not acceptable in today's networks. So in transition situations, we have to connect these two routing protocols without any downtime. Here, route redistribution could help us. With route redistribution, we could learn EIGRP, OSPF routes, and vice versa. And now our new network, which is this domain, could work together without any downtime, and you redistribute EIGRP routes to OSPF and OSPF routes to EIGRP. For this purpose, we need at least a router in between, which connects to each routing domain and configure both routing protocols on it. Route redistribution could also use between two same routing protocols. For example, you use EIGRP with the AS number 1 and they use EIGRP with the AS number 2. Now you have to redistribute EIGRP routes from AS number 2 to EIGRP with the AS number 1 and the vice versa. The other situation, you may use, for example, EIGRP for your internal routing and use BGP between two sections. So assume that we have EIGRP here and we have EIGRP here, but in between we have BGP. Now we have to redistribute EIGRP routes to BGP and vice versa. So as you could see, route redistribution is done when you have two different routing protocols between your networks, and route redistribution could help you to learn the other side routes. Remember that as EIGRP, OSPF, or any other routing protocol has its own structure of routing topology table, route redistribution could not send the topology table, and route redistribution only advertises the routes, which has the same structure both in EIGRP and OSPF or any other routing protocols. It's in a standard, and all routing protocols and all the routers know that. But EIGRP, OSPF, or any other routing protocol have their own topology table structure, so route redistribution could not send the routing topology table. Therefore, it sends the routing table. Now let's see route redistribution command format. Route redistribution is done by redistribute command. This command is done in router subcommand mode. I mean config-router for IPv4 and config-RTR for IPv6 routing. This is the general format of redistribute command, not especially for EIGRP. So we do route redistribution with the redistribute command in router subcommand mode. After redistribute, we determine the source routing protocol, which could be BGP, EIGRP, connected, ISIS, OSPF, or any other types of routes. If you use, for example, OSPF or EIGRP, after protocol, you should determine the process ID or the AS number, and then we could specify the metric related parameters such as bandwidth, delay, reliability, link load, and MTU. And if route redistribution is done for OSPF, you could use the match command and or the match parameters with the internal NSSA external type 1 and external type 2 to determine the type of OSPF route. And then we could tag our route with an integer value, which could be used in the route tagging or route maps or route filtering. And finally, with the route map, if you use route filtering with route map, you could specify the name of the route map that you have defined before. Now let's configure route redistribution in EIGRP. It's very easy. There's only one command, as we saw. I choose this scenario. Since our course is EIGRP, I choose only EIGRP route redistribution, not redistribution between EIGRP and OSPF. Therefore, I choose EIGRP with the AS number 1 here and the EIGRP with the AS number 2 here, and configure these routers for EIGRP 2, router 3, and this side of router 2 and this side of router 2 is for EIGRP 1. I disable auto summary, and now as you could see, we have the network 10.1 here and 192.168 here and 172.16 between routers. Now I will show you that router 2 knows about EIGRP 2 and EIGRP 1 both, but router 1 and router 3 only knows their domain routing information. Router 1 only knows the connected routes and router 3 too. Now we want to redistribute EIGRP in router 2 to inform router 3 about the networks of here and inform router 1 about the networks that are here. Let's do it. First, let's check our configuration with show IP route EIGRP. As you could see, router 1 has no any EIGRP routes because all routes are connected. So I choose show IP route only. And as you could see, the networks of 10.1.1, 10.1.2, 10.1.3, and 172.16.1.0 all are directly connected. And router 1 does not know anything about the network of 192.168 or any other networks that are in AS number 2. It is also true for router 3. As you could see, show IP route, you will see that the same is true for router 3. But in router 2, let's see, show IP route EIGRP and the AS number 1. As you could see, the network of 10.1.3, 2, and 1 are learned from EIGRP from the AS number 1, and the network of 192.168, 1, 2, and 3 from EIGRP 2. Therefore, router 2 knows all about these routes, but router 1 and router 3 does not. Now let's configure our router distribution to help router 1 and router 3. So we go to configure terminal, router EIGRP 1. Let's start from router EIGRP 1. Let me put it upper and clear the screen for better visibility. Now I say redistribute the networks from EIGRP, and when I'm in EIGRP 1, I should redistribute for EIGRP AS number 2 and the vice versa. So I do my configuration here. Now let's go to router EIGRP 2 and do redistribution for EIGRP AS number 1. Now router 1 and router 3 should know about the related networks. Let's clear the screen and say show IP route EIGRP. As you could see, these routes learn from EX. What is EX? Let's see. EX stands for EIGRP external routes. This is not from our domain. I learned it from the other domain. As you could see, the network 192.168.1.1 and the other ones. The same is true for router 3. Show IP route EIGRP and 10.1 networks are reachable from router 3 now. Let me test it. 10.1.2.1 I think is the IP of the interface. Yes, the connectivity is okay. This is route redistribution, as simple as you see. The same configuration is true for EIGRP or any other routing protocols from IPv6. If we go to router and say that IPv6 unicast routing for enabling IPv6 routing and say IPv6 router EIGRP1, and you see that we have redistribute command again here from EIGRP and the AS number and other parameters that you could see. Now it's summary time. In this lecture, we learned where we could use EIGRP route redistribution and configure route redistribution for IPv4 or EIGRP for IPv4, and I show you how to use it for EIGRP for IPv6 too. I hope this lecture helps you to improve your knowledge, and see you in the next lecture.